Hey, what's going on, everybody? Corey Wright here, Real Talk. If you don't know what it is, you will soon find out. I'm here today with...
I'm Suzy Hansen, the MLA for Halifax Needham.
So we're going to discuss a few things today. Her new role, her life, what brought her into this role. We're going to talk about community and some other great stuff. So just stay tuned. So for the people that don't know you, can you tell them a little bit about yourself?
I can. I'm Suzy Hansen. I am born and raised in this community. I was raised in Uniacke Square, and then later on I moved into Mulgrave Park, and now I live in the north end of Halifax. I was brought up in the church. I love music, and I wear many hats because I didn't just go into politics. Actually, politics kind of found me. The community work that I've done over the number of years that I've been involved in community has kind of pushed me into a role to help community a lot more.
So when did you decide that politics would be a place for you?
Well, politics is it can be a bit challenging, but it became my life when I decided to want to step up for the school board. So in 2016, I ran for the school board member position for this riding, and I actually held the seat. It was disbanded in 2018, which sparked my love for advocacy even more, because I couldn't understand why you would get rid of such a crucial role in our children's lives when it comes to making decisions in education, all because of a political vice, right?
Yeah.
So that's what kind of sparked me into how do I sit in that seat to help make those decisions. And so, obviously elections come up, but something hadn't come up after the school board, so I just kept doing advocacy work in community, and then community asked me again to step up for this role as the MLA in 2021.
Nice. Now you said from 2016 to 2018 you were on, and then they took it.
Yes.
Why does that just seem like it's a reoccurring thing when it comes to our communities? There's something, gets implemented or something's created, and then it actually works. The people actually like it. And then it's like, oh, the funding gets cut, or oh no, it doesn't work. We have to move it. Or why does that always happen with the communities? I don't get that.
Well, in this particular instance, it was across the province, right? So the school boards were province-wide, and so they disbanded the school boards, other than the French school board, because that one was culturally a cultural linguistic school board. So they kept that board, but all of the provincial school boards were gone. So it got removed because they felt like there wasn't a need for the advocacy. They wanted to cut the red tape. They didn't want to have to be held accountable by community, and so they removed the community, and they said, you know what, we will just have directions through the department and through the minister.
Wow, so they kept the French because it was culturally? How do Black Nova Scotians get a cultural board like that where we're untouched?
That's a good question.
How could that happen?
That's something that I'm always like, how do we solidify our place in government? How do we do that as African Nova Scotians?
Yeah.
And one of those pieces for me, which is something that I've been talking about in my 3.5 years in legislature, is we need to be recognized as a distinct people. I've 100%. Heard from the community. I've heard from the Black family meetings and many other Black community groups that we've had conversations with, and the key piece is our distinction. And so I brought this up to the minister in the House, and the minister felt like it was divisive. She had said to me, you know what, Suzy, this is not the place to have this conversation. But to me, I seen it the way that you did.
Where would be the place to have the...
That was my answer. Where would be the place? So my thought is, if we can have a distinction similar to the Acadian families, similar to the Gaelic families, we need to have a piece of legislation that states that we're protected the same way.
Well, I'm 9 generations here. Like my blood was here before Canada was Canada.
Yes. Yes.
So how do my people be protected? Like, it just seems like we get pushed to the outskirts, and then the outskirts become the hot spots. So then they're like, oh, here, no, go further. We need the spots that you're at, actually. So then you go farther, and they keep pushing us out. And it's with everything. It's weird.
Well, I think with acknowledgement comes accountability. And if they don't acknowledge that, there's no accountability to that. So in order for us to really push the envelope, we have to show them in full force, in presence, in who we are as a people, to their faces, what we stand for and what we want. And because we don't always do that, it gives them an easy way to not acknowledge that.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, I got a couple questions here. We went on, it's all good.
I love it.
But housing is a big issue here. House and rent prices are high, homelessness is growing. What do you think can solve that problem?
Well, there's a lot of pieces to solving. Like, I mean, right now, there's just a Band-Aid on top. They have the rent cap. And that's only because we as the NDP government, NDP, we're not the government yet, we will be at some point, but we as the NDP have pushed for them to put a cap on rising rents. We would like to see a rent control process, a system in place where there's accountability, where there's enforcement, where the rents don't rise higher than a certain percentage based on the vacancy rate. And it's a system, it's not just one piece to that puzzle. And then the other piece of that is rent-to-own home ownership. We know that young people right now and young families are leaving our province because they just cannot make ends meet. They can't afford to buy a home in Nova Scotia, which is really sad because this is a wonderful place to live, to raise your family, to be here.
Yes.
And we don't see enough of that because the cost of living is high and you can't actually own a home right now.
No disrespect to the youngins, but figure it out. We were young, I was young, figure it out. But what if, like, rent a home to, and I'm going to bring it back to the people, the African Nova Scotians, the ones that were pushed out of the Beachvilles, the Africvilles, and other small African Nova Scotian communities, and we get pushed in the Mulgrave Parks, the Uniacke Squares, the pubs, but we don't get to own anything. We went from ownership to owning our home on oceanfront property, and then we're now put into housing projects and got to pay rent. So there's no equity being passed down to generations.
That's right.
It's actually being poured out of the generations because we're paying rent to someone that doesn't want to help. Is what I'm getting to, is there a way that those that are grandfathered into the Uniacke Squares, into the Mulgrave Parks and the pubs and every other housing project, for us to be able to rent to own our units?
That was a rumor at some point throughout the decades of housing.
That's how it was. So that's what they were built for, I was told.
That is something that when you ask the Nova Scotia Provincial Housing Agency, because it's been renamed because now it's the government entity. It was in the city's hands before, and then it was government. Like it passes so many different pieces right now.
And every time they pass it on, they take a piece out of what they're passing on.
And they don't acknowledge that this happened. So then they can easily say, well, we don't have that paperwork. We don't know. It's lost in the shuffle, anything like that, right? I think to your point, just from starting from the beginning, we lost our generational wealth.
Yes.
And that happened because our land was taken from us. And we were moved out of these spaces.
In garbage trucks.
And in droves, right? From many different communities on many different occasions. And because of that, we don't have a government or a city that's taken ownership of that and has taken accountability of that to kind of give us anything back.
And they just keep telling us we're the problem. pick your bootstraps up, all that stuff.
And it comes down to two different things. Like when you mentioned before, young people, you need to just pick it up and just work hard. Absolutely, that would be the case if we had generational wealth. If we had the wealth behind us and the family backing behind us the way that other families do, we would definitely be in a different position. But because we don't, and because we have the intergenerational trauma that happens from all of the things that have happened to our families through generations, it's not as easy for us to kind of, take a deep breath and move forward, right?
100%.
So generational wealth, intergenerational trauma that's happened is causing our people, African Nova Scotians, and other folks who have come here that are experiencing racism and systemic racism, it's causing them to feel a little bit pushed behind. But what we need to be doing, and this is why I think, the acknowledgement of who we are as a people in this province and the work and the accomplishments that we've done as African Nova Scotians need to be recognized, is because that holds weight. It actually tells them and it recognizes us on the work that we've done and who we are and what we've accomplished, to kind of give us that recognition, to bolster us in a way that they can't disregard it. You know what I mean? So then government has to actually move on that. All levels of government have to act on that, whether it's municipal, federal, or provincial. And because we don't actually have that, that kind of holds us back. But to your point, we also, with Uniacke Square and Mulgrave Park, those housing developments were built to house the people of Africville and to house the people of Jacob Street, who were in the considered slum relocation, right? And so because of that, they had taken everything from these people that they owned, the land that they owned, the houses that they owned, and move them into a space. It's a system, right? It's a system of oppression.
And then they're taking them from these parts now. Now they're in the Uniacke Squares, the Mulgrave Parks, and then they say, okay, well, they put all these stipulations in place, only target us, and they say, if this happens, you're out. If my son gets arrested, if the police raid my house, I'm kicked out. If this happens, I'm gone. But it only seems like it targets the blacks. Like, why would the police come for my son? Because my son's out there selling drugs. Why? Because you took our generational wealth. Like, it just always comes from something. If he's not selling drugs because of that, he's selling drugs because in the employment field, they don't want to hire him. So and then you just back us in a corner, and then everything that we do, you're like, okay, if you do that, you're gone. And the list, it's just like you go to the Dome in Halifax, the nightclub. They have a list of do's and don'ts, what don't get you into the club. And when you look at all the don'ts, it describes a black person. It describes a black male. So it's like the same thing.
But you know what? And this is where our voices matter, right? Because, organizations bank on our voices not being collective.
Yeah, there are a lot of silos.
That's what I mean. And because they target, families that don't typically speak up, or are afraid to lose their home, or, don't want to stir up anything, that's why it continues to happen. So I say this in my office, as the MLA, we are there to help people through the services, through the departments, navigate these things, right? If they knew that they could call our office or call any MLA that is responsible for their area to help them through this system, because that's what it is. It's a system that is keeping folks in this position. If they were to call and ask about certain things and have them push for these things, then you would see different outcomes. Like, we have an Office of African Nova Scotian Affairs. That is what they're there for. They're there to help African Nova Scotians like ourselves, and advocate for some of the issues that are happening in government. They're there to be that voice, but we don't utilize them enough. And we don't feel like they are doing the work in the way that they should be doing, because we don't actually push them to do that work. They work for us. The same as me as an MLA. I work for the elected people. I'm elected by the people, but I work for the people that have elected me. And at the end of the day, my job is to help all of my constituents, no matter what that looks like, in what way I can, in whatever way I can, right? So it's utilizing the systems that are in place, but using it in a way that works for you.
Now I want to go a little. I want you to elaborate on the family piece you were just talking about, because I know family's big for you, always been. So tell us more about like your family here in the North End and what it means to you.
Okay. Well, my grandmother raised my mom and her sisters and brothers in Africville. And so I am a proud descendant of Africville. And my grandmother was one of the families that were moved to the square. And so, or to Mulgrave Park, then to the square. So in the public housing units. And my family means the world to me because I grew up with my family. My cousins are my brothers and sisters because we all grew up together. And it's what drives us to do the work that we do. We were surrounded by strong women and strong men in our family. We seen, rights and wrongs, and we understood what that meant. Things were told to us in ways that, helped us to be resilient and help us understand what was going on.
Yep.
And we hope to do the same for other young people in community. But to me, that is what community was about. Community is our extended family, right? Like, when we grow up in a community, when I grew up in Uniacke Square, my neighbors were like my best friends. Everybody around me was like, we looked out for each other. My mother knew, the mother down the street and the grandmother over here, and we all watched each other's children.
You could literally go to every door, knock on there, and just say, hey,
That's
how
right.
you doing?
If anything happened to you, you could run in and be like, I need a Band-Aid. And you could get a Band-Aid. You need a drink of water? Go get a drink of water. And that's how what community meant for us. And I mean, now that time has changed, we want our own kids to have that sense of community. But it's not always the same when we see so many changes in community happening that you don't have that sense of cohesiveness in the same way. I would love to see us continue to have that in all of the communities in which we grow up in, whether it's Uniacke Square, whether it's Mulgrave Park, whether it's the pubs, whether it's in Fairview or Dartmouth, right? I think we have to get back to understanding that we are there to help take care of each other. And there should be no judgment, but at the same time, we should be helping each other figure things out.
100%.
Because that's what we used to do, right?
But that's what a community is. It's supposed to be. But I think like along the way, some of us lost that what community is, because you remember that crazy time? I'm afraid to say it, but the pandemic, the quarantine, like you have neighbors telling on neighbors, calling the police, oh, they have 7 people over there. It's like, what? Are you crazy? Are the government, are the police gonna help you shovel your doorway when it's wintertime? Are they gonna, you know what I mean? Like we forget that community is where it all starts, and the government is supposed to serve us. Like we are private citizens, they are public servants. And we forget that in the community. And I'm not even sure if a lot of us even know that.
I was going to say, and some people don't know that. Because I mean, in my role, like only in the 3.5 years that I've been here,
and it suits you well.
I love it. I love the job that I do. I love it more so in community than I do in the house. In the house, luckily I have a theater background. I'm able to kind of navigate that in ways that like I think they don't quite understand why I can be so kind and nice and thoughtful, but at the same time firm and get my point across. But the way that my role is, I want every community member to know that we have your back, that we are here to help you through that. And there's times where I can't always help, but I'm going to direct you to someone else who can, or I'm going to show you another process in which you can, get some results out of that, right? Because you're right, we are there to serve. And I take this from like, when you say it looks good on me, it's like, this is the stuff that I've been doing because it's in me to do. Like, I was raised by a mom who served people in community, who did that work in community, and we watched that. And we were like, so in awe to know that like she could be happy amongst all the many things that were going on in her life to help others and do that work. And I know my dad was that guy. Like, everybody loved Dad and he was great. And he had his own situations going on, but he still would do everything that he could to shovel someone's front yard or to, go pick up the groceries for somebody. And that's how we were raised. And I think that's what we forget sometimes. And I would hope that I would instill that in my kids and some other kids around us that are seeing that this is a way to live. we can actually do things for other people and still feel good about that.
But I kind of feel like our community, and yes, it is under attack, but I mean, like, it just seems like every 10 years or so, there's like a strategic play to dissemble the growth that happened in our communities. Like, they'll put together some sort of framework where, you know, like I said, okay, if this happens, you get put out. This happens, you get put out. You can't, and then you're on the bottom of a waiting list that they never see you. But then they'll integrate us with another persons or people of culture, different culture, and not give any, like, not awareness or just like any thoughtfulness to make a proper introduction from both parties. Like, there's none of that. It's just like, here, you go in here and y'all deal with it. Like, there's a lot of Syrians in the neighborhoods now, and then, you know, like the Indians from you know, East Indians, and a lot of other races coming, and it just seems like they're piling in, but the government's not taking the time to say, hey, you guys, introduction to the community people that's already been here. We made Uniacke Square and Mulgrave Park for Africville descendants. This is some culture that you need to know. Nothing, they just throw them in, and then it's like, you guys figure it out. And I just feel like that's super wrong. And what is going to be the next thing that they're going to put in to push us as the African Nova Scotians out?
So I have to say that, like, you're right, there has been multiple changes over the past decade, I'd say, right? And I'm just being nice saying a decade, because I lived in Uniacke Square 20 plus years ago, right? So I think, and I've had a conversation with an immigration services person about this, because I agree with you. I think we have to think about how we place folks and where we put people and what we surround them with, i.e. supports. But we also have to remember that, you know, we also have African Nova Scotians, and we have families who have lived here that are not African Nova Scotians, that are marginalized, and that have had a relationship or had a way of living in this community. And they all have an understanding of what that looks like because they've lived there for so long. I think we as a government haven't done the right things when it comes to educating new folks that are coming here about the families and the communities in which they place folks, or where they, or even in general as a whole. Like, I've gone to a citizenship ceremony, and there is no African Nova Scotian discussion or even anything on the testing that says anything about African Nova Scotians. So folks that come here have no idea of, like, this background history.
Exactly.
And you're not going to learn it in a paragraph.
And you're not going to learn it in anything.
You need to be able to have an understanding of what that looks like, right? And so I will say that is something that they're not doing right, and that needs to be done appropriately, and it needs to be done in conjunction with everybody in these communities, right? And that could be any community in particular.
100%.
But I also want to say that, you know, when it comes to having new folks here in our communities, we are also, as a government, not building up the infrastructure to have people here in a way that is going to be healthy for them, which in turn causes a lot of other problems, right? So it comes down to, you know, making sure that there's an education piece for all parties, because, you know, like, I mean, I'm fortunate, my dad is from Trinidad, and he has East Indian and North and South Indian in him, but so I have an understanding of that family, and I know, but not everybody has an understanding of those cultures. And when we have these conversations, it shouldn't be uncomfortable, and it shouldn't be hard. It should be something where we are actually talking about what this looks like for our community, because
and our children,
they may live here, they're also going to go to school here. They're also going to be at work here. They're also going to be businessing here. So we have to actually have, you know, a common understanding of what this looks like for all of our families on both ends, right? So, or multiple ends. And so, and I just have to say this because I've always been in awe at, like, how we are as African Nova Scotians. We've been put on so much. They burden our families and our communities so much that eventually we do come to a breaking point, because African Nova Scotians are naturally caring. We are welcoming. We are like family orientated. We want to get to know you. We want you to come and have some food, have a tea, have a drink. That's who we are as a people. And we were all raised like that, whether it's now or later. But I find that when you continue to put more and more on our communities, there is a breaking point. After there's no education, after there's no communication, there's a breaking point where community members are like, what is going on here? I'm feeling like I don't belong in my own community, and that's not
and
how
I've
it's
been
supposed
here,
to be.
though. Like,
exactly.
How can you wake up
So, you know,
one
to
day,
those points, right? Right.
You just wake up, it's like, man, I don't even feel home. Like, I don't even understand this. I don't feel home. Like, it's
and we
just so
shouldn't be
much.
upset for those reasons, right?
No.
Because there are people that come here for a better life, and we try our best to make people feel welcome. But after a while, when we don't feel that same welcome and that same comfort from the from being here forever, because we've been here, then that changes the way that.
Well, it's super discouraging when I go to school and I'm not treated the same.
Yeah.
I go into my bank, I'm trying to get a mortgage loan, you know what I mean, for a host. I'm not treated the same. I'm getting higher rates, or I'm getting the smallest loan for. And that small loan isn't even enough for the host. Yeah. So what's the point of the loan? You're just going to say, oh, yeah, well, we can get you a loan. For what? That can't buy me a mobile home. So what is the loan for? I told you I'm coming in for a house. Yeah. And you ain't even giving me a loan to get a mobile. Then go to the hospital, and then it's like, oh, okay, oh yeah, oh no, just take a couple Tylenol, come back next week, and we'll see it again if it's okay. And it's like every aspect of every system, it's like it just breaks us down. Well, it doesn't break us down, but it's discouraging, and it's. But anywho, I was going on a tangent there. Okay, the riding in Halifax Needham has in the past been one of the lowest in federal spending to now in the top 10. Lots of investment is happening here. Do you have any plans to make sure the descendants of those who have been here to participate in the new economy?
Absolutely. I mean, provincially, we could be doing it through community benefits agreements, which the piece of legislation is sitting on the minister's desk, the Minister of Housing's desk. I actually asked him about it, and he hasn't responded in a way that makes sense to being able to pass this piece of legislation so communities can benefit from the process of hiring, staff that look like them, hiring developers that look like them, hiring any workers that look like them, or even allowing people to actually own homes in these communities that look like them and not have to move outside of their communities. So, I mean, that's just one piece, but I think, when it comes down to any of the federal funding that comes forward, we as organizations, we as communities need to be well aware of what these fundings look like for us. And we need to come together and talk about how do we approach it in ways, i.e. grants or like putting proposals forward so that we can actually gain some of that funding too. Because as we know, we see the same groups of people being able to access the funding because they know how the process goes. Yeah. And so they're able to work it through without letting anybody else know how this process goes.
And we have non-black organizations getting black money, getting black funding. How does that happen? That blows my mind.
It comes down to not having African Nova Scotians as a distinct people being recognized, because right now it's anyone of African descent. And so, because of that, it could be anyone in the Africa diaspora, right?
Oh, okay. So that's another
specific,
rule.
That's right. If we are specific about our distinction and who we are, and then break that down as who we are as African Nova Scotians, which there is an actual breakdown of that, then there's no denying who should have priority. Because we could say, in every piece of legislation or every proposal or every funding agreement or any federal promising or monies exchange, first and foremost in Nova Scotia could be of African Nova Scotian descent.
So now that we're on the Africville topic, I know we've
been back and forth.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So Is there a plan to do something specifically for the remaining surviving residents so they can get some sort of, you know, people hate this word, but reparations. You know what I mean? It's like it's scared. Reparations. Oh my gosh, we can't talk. Listen, people are owed things, and that's just hands down. Like every other race that was discriminated against in the past or anything happened, they were giving something
but
for
we don't even need to
trying
dance
to
around
make
that.
right.
At the end of the day, every other culture but us has received monetary reparations.
Yes.
They have received
every single one of them.
Something else. And I think that there's an issue with that. Because when we talk about you know, the harms that have happened across the province by a number of Black communities, the harms have been transferred all along through their generations. These folks have experienced some wild stuff that have happened in their lives because of the harm that has happened initially to their ancestors. That in itself, you know, reparations, I'm down for reparations. Listen, if you want to give monetary, if you want to give land, if you want to give consistent, sustainable funding for certain things, absolutely. Why? Because we should never have to feel like it's wrong for us to ask for what is right. If it is deserved to us because of the harms that have happened to us, it has happened to other communities. I mean, just something as small as a dump being put into a white community, there was an uproar in the community and they said, oh we're so sorry, we're sorry about that. Here, let us give you some money for that because we understand that it was a hard time for you. Without even question, without even thought. And
generations of us playing in the dump.
Africville, who has had a dump, a slaughterhouse, a prison, who have had, you know, you name anything that has happened there, it has happened. Water that hasn't been drinkable without boiling the water. Like, you tell me, if you could have done anything, the worst thing that you could have done to anybody was done to Africville and the people of Africville. I think the least that they could do, considering the fact that we have a small amount of Africville residents still living.
But that's what they're waiting on, for them to die, and then Africville will be really swept right under the rug.
And it's unfortunate, but guess what? The Africville spirit lives on through the descendants, through the people who have heard the stories, who now it's actually been acknowledged to in UNESCO. So it is a historical site by international, you know, degree, that this is a site of like oppression and harm, and we need to, you know, continue to keep this history going. But because it's internationally known now, and it was nationally known, why haven't we as a province acknowledged it in that way? Why haven't we as a city acknowledged it in that way? Are you asking me? I didn't mean to ask, but
no.
But
Well, I have the answer that I think.
We need to make sure that when the residents and anyone else who has ties to Africville may, you know, move on or are not using their voice in the same way because they cannot, we as the young people in the generation after them and further down need to continue pushing that so that it never gets forgotten. And we will always have, and we should have, acknowledgement and some sort of reparation from all levels of government.
Well, I think it's not recognized because of the players in the game, the players on the board, and they have the money to sweep it under the rug. You got to think, you have the Bridge Commission, that's right on Africville land. Then you have that plant, I don't even know what it's called, but you know what I'm talking about. That plant right there, that generates however much money a year. Then you have the railroad going right through. Like, these are 3 mega billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar companies that just exploited as much as they could. And
so let me tell you that this is my thought, and I've said this in community meetings when they had like an Africville reimagining in Africville, like, what does this look like? Like, I've gone to many meetings about reparations and what does that look like, and like, you know, just talking about what folks are thinking, right? And my thought is this, and I say this because sometimes people don't like to hear things out loud because they feel like you might stir the pot, or you might say some things that we'll never see. But you know what? If you don't talk about it, you never know what you're going to get if you don't say it.
100%.
I feel like federally, there's a responsibility. There's a ton of federal businesses and corporations and things that actually are on the site of Africville.
Okay.
How are they not?
I didn't know
How
that.
are they not? CN Rail, the container pier, there's a number of pieces, federally, provincially, and municipally, that they could all be tying into. Think about this. If we were able to utilize the lands in which, because we don't have all the lands, because the lands have been taken piece by piece, but if we were to utilize the lands that are still available to be able to create our own sustainable wealth for now until whenever,
it's there.
It is there. We could be doing like some of our Indigenous brothers and sisters do. We could be leasing the land. We could be receiving funding by, like how many pieces of how many container piers we have here, container ports we have here. We are taxing you on that.
Yep.
Or the railroad. Oh, well, you're going to go through here. Well, the railroad has to pay a tithe.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know what I mean? There's a ton of things that we could be doing that would keep us sustainable as Africville, but would also continue to let them know that this is who we are as a people, and we are not going to let you just continue to roll over us and do what you want with us, right? And I think there are tons of ways to think about that, but if we want to think about each level of government that has a portion of that land or uses a portion of that land, what are we gaining from them being there? And how can we create an agreement to gain from them?
Well, there should be an AF pass for the bridge. Well, they got the MAC pass, the AF pass. So we shout out Wendy Wilson on the flag. If you have that flag in your window, boom, you know what I mean? Like, oh, okay, you've been here. All right, peace. No $1.25 for you.
Right. Well,
That's just a start.
I mean, at this point, this government, let's see if they put this forward about, taking the tolls off the bridge. We'll see how that works.
Well, yeah.
So we don't know. But I mean, I think, there are tons of ways. Reparations does not mean money. It can also mean other things.
Free education for our children to go to school.
100%.
Like, that's not hard. Yeah. That's not hard at all. Yeah. Not fill out 1,000 forms because you're putting in all these different things. It's like, oh, okay, we could do 7 steps, and then some families get discouraged. They don't know how. They don't have the tools to do steps 1 to 4, and they bank on that.
That's right.
And so, really, there's all kinds of funding for African Nova Scotians. Yeah, but if you have this, you can't get it. If this, you can't get it. If that, you can't. That. So then, our population is what, 13%? It's But the eligibility for those students to go, you just took down all that, and it's 7%. Yeah. And then, out of that 7%, how many of them actually want to go to school? How many want to start their own business Think
about this though, right? How discouraged are you when you think you automatically can't afford to go to school when you're a kid? You know what I mean? Like, how pumped up are you if, in grade 7, your mom and dad are struggling, or something's going on, and you know that you can't even afford, you don't even know what the price is.
You can't go to the ski retreat. You can't go to the ski retreat. You can't
think about those things, right? Because you're living day to day, and the struggle is real, right? Yeah. And the struggle doesn't have to be there if we had things in place that gave us opportunities in the way that they should, right?
Facts.
Yeah.
Facts. Now, we're getting ready to close this. I just want to ask you, do you have any final thoughts or anything you would like to say to the people?
Well, I want to say that I think this is great. I think having real talk is very important. Some folks don't get to hear this all the time. And, I mean, who we are is who we are, and we can't change that. But what we do in the work that we do makes a real difference for other folks, right? So I just want people to know that you can come to me anytime. You can ask me questions. Any information that I have is never put in a bank and not shared. I will share with you everything that I know, because that's the way that we do better. Is how we share that information with each one.
Each one
old
teach
school.
one.
See, we're back to community, right? Each one teach one. But that's the process, right? And we need more people to have an understanding and to step up and speak these real conversations, just like yourself, but as well, so people can hear that, we are everyday people, but we need to step up and do the work that needs to be done in community. Because it's our community that we're talking about.
And we need to buy Bitcoin.
Listen, I'm ready to learn. I'm ready to learn.
Sounds good. Okay, well then that'll be next episode for us.
Sounds good.
Look forward to seeing you again. All right.